Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. We want to help. Send your questions to info@collegeknowledge.net. These can be about college, finances, careers, and anything else you have questions on.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of College Knowledge. I am your host today, Mr. Joe Kearns. I have Niall behind the computer on the other side of the room. Niall, did you know Carnegie Mellon has some interesting facts about it, but one that I highlighted today is just like, oh, no, it went away. Just like Northwestern's Rock and Tufts Cannon, Carnegie Mellon boasts a commonly painted object in the middle of the campus known as the fence. And it's a little bit cooler than the other two I mentioned because the original wooden fence, before it collapsed in 1993, was considered the most painted object by the Guinness Book of World Records. Don't worry, though, Niall, the fence was rebuilt with concrete and reinforced steel, so now it'll be there for a while.
Wow. That is certainly interesting. I did not know that, Joe.
I did. Now you know. I did. Now you know. Now. And I'm sure a lot of Carnegie Mellon students also are aware of that, which is interesting because we have a wonderful opportunity to speak with someone from Carnegie Mellon today. He is Keith Webster, the Dean of University Libraries at Carnegie Mellon University. Dean Webster, thank you so much for being with us today. I think we're going to have a very informative and interesting conversation, sir.
It's great to be here. I'm delighted to be with you. And the fence is just behind me. If you were to see through my window, you would see the fence. Still a much loved tradition. It's painted almost every day of the academic year by groups of students. It's a wonderful tradition.
I love it. Love it. Hey, traditions. It's what, one of those things I joke about. We've had conversations in the past about online learning and, not being on campus when we went through the pandemic. And I said, look, there's things that you can't get if you're not on campus, interaction with other students, professors, office hours, and even wonderful traditions like that just, might be, I'll say even sometimes a little therapeutic, or just something that brightens up your day when you walk past the fence or see someone painting on it. It's an interesting tradition. I like it. So Dean Webster, thank you for being here. Always like to know a little bit more about your story, your journey. How did you get to Carnegie Mellon? What was your path? What was your college journey like? How did you get to where you're at today?
So, as you might have picked up from the accent, I'm not from Pittsburgh. I'm not even from the United States. I grew up in Scotland, went to university to study computer science, but migrated into studying library science along that. I had in high school written a computer program to manage catalogs in libraries and anything that was collectible. So it was a kind of natural evolution for me. And I made my career in libraries because I was interested in the possibilities that computers would bring to help us organize information, retrieve it, and discover it. And whilst I've had the occasional departure from the field, really to develop my skills in government and in industry, most of my working life has been in universities and research organizations. Starting off in the UK, I led libraries in London, then moved to New Zealand to become university librarian in Wellington, the capital city. Moved to Australia for a few years to the University of Queensland, and then came to the United States in 2011 to spend a bit of time in publishing with John Wiley & Sons, the academic publisher, and moved to Carnegie Mellon in 2013 to become Dean of University Libraries. And over my time here, my role and my portfolio have expanded to embrace a number of interdisciplinary programs, which I've no doubt we'll talk about during this conversation.
Yeah. So, first question, all over the world, different cultures, how different are libraries in one area of the country compared to what we know from in the United States? I'm sure there has to be some differences that stick out.
That's a good question. My journey has been very much in the English-speaking world, but what I think I can certainly point to is in countries like New Zealand and Australia, there is a very strong reflection of the different cultures in those countries. University libraries in New Zealand very much embrace the symbols, traditions, cultures of the Maori people alongside the white immigrants to that country. Similarly, in Australia, we see a reflection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. But to a large extent, they are achieving the same mission. They are there to support education and research. In today's digital world, the collections that libraries provide are very similar.
Okay. And then obviously, I mean, you mentioned it, but I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that have probably had a feeling that libraries, hey, what's the point? We live in a digital age now. What, why, libraries, are they becoming a thing of the past? I mean, I would disagree with those individuals, but I know that it's got to be a topic of conversation, something that you come across quite often.
Sure. I've just come back from a conference in London where I was debating a motion that academic libraries are no longer necessary. And I was the speaker for the motion. So I was arguing, indeed, that libraries are no longer necessary. And that was a bit of stagecraft. I was presenting an argument that I didn't wholly believe in, because I truly do see the critical importance of libraries. But what I think you see is that libraries have shifted because of the digital revolution. For many people, they think of libraries as big buildings full of books. Yep. If you go to Google, do a search for library, bring up the images that come back, and it's either Renaissance libraries with beautiful ceiling paintings and lots of books, or brutalist 1970s concrete libraries with lots of books. But the reality is somewhat different. Of course, we still have books, and nobody is suggesting that we completely lose the books that we have. We are gradually removing collections to make more space for students, but they do still provide an important resource. But what we know is that the library is absolutely at the heart of the student experience. Students will spend more time in the library than almost any other place, at least during their waking hours. It has, for many students, become the primary non-classroom academic destination on campus. It's the place where students come to do serious work. Although, we do try and encourage that serious work to have an element of fun. So we increasingly design libraries with good quality cafes or dining spaces. We create informal, casual areas where people can hang out, catch up with their friends, because we see that as an important part of the student experience.
It was just interesting. I mean, it's, when you put it that way, I always kind of relate, some information to parents and students, high school students, to say, all right, well, when you visit a campus, I would imagine if, again, the majority of your waking hours are spent in this one building, it's probably one of those buildings that you want to look at when you do a visit and really see.
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. And a few years ago, there was a journal article from the people who look after facilities and universities, trying to understand how students make college decisions. And they asked a cohort of students to respond to a variety of prompts. And as you might expect, the facilities for their major, for their field of study, were ranked number one. But libraries were ranked number 2 exactly for that reason. And I often tell people that, if they get the chance to visit a university campus, to go to the library, even if it's not on the official tour, because that will give you a sense of the vibrancy in the place. It will give you a great measure of how much that institution cares about its students. Because if you see investment in library facilities, you see support for students.
Yeah. Is there anything that students may look for, that they may see that kind of shows that care for students, that there is a investment in the library, in the students? Is there anything that maybe families or students can see differently from campus to campus, or anything they should look for that might help them figure that out?
Sure. I think that, getting a sense of the energy about the place is important. So if you're able to visit, just, are there lots of students around? Does it feel like there's an energy? Does it feel like a space that you would be willing to spend 15 to 30 hours a week working in? But it's important to appreciate also that space is designed differently for different activities. The space that I need when I'm writing an essay is very different from the space that I need when I'm working with my classmates on a project. So think about the learning activities of a typical student, preparing group presentations, working on group projects, individual presentations, writing essays, preparing for exams, and think about the space that you like to work in while you're doing those sorts of activities, and look out for that. That's absolutely the way that I would encourage people to reflect upon that. And for parents, and I have a daughter who's at university just now, and when I think about my own experience as an undergraduate, it is very different from hers today. So I need to set aside my own experiences and think about today's world. It's not about going to the library to find some books and read them. It is very much a technological journey today. And again, practical things like, if you're in the library for a number of hours, do you have access to refreshments? How good is the Wi-Fi? If you're going to be there in the evening, is it well lit? Does it feel comfortable and safe? And a place that you would be happy to be leaving at 11 p.m. or midnight and going back to your dorm.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a perspective that I think is very valuable. And again, because the digital age has evolved without a doubt, right? And as libraries, like you said, it may not be the purpose of finding that book to read or, checking out a book, as much research because of what we can do with computers. I mean, God, you can find a fun fact on the fence on your phone, right? From researching. But really going in with that state of mind, I think that there are some specific questions. I always say when you visit a college campus that you should know what you're going to ask yourself. And through this conversation, it's, what is the library environment like? I'm going to be spending a lot of time there. How does that compare to the school I visited last week? Right. And a lot of the questions you mentioned, the safety factor, I might be getting home, leaving that library when it's dark out. What is the safety from me walking from the library to my dorm? Things like that. I think are very important that sometimes get overlooked. So definitely take some of those pieces into consideration. Now, Dean, I also noticed that you are the director of emerging and integrative media initiatives. So tell me a little bit more about that.
So that was the least worst title we could come up with to describe a bunch of interdisciplinary programs.
Because my question is, what is that?
If anybody has a better idea, please send it in on a postcard. But I oversee a number of interdisciplinary programs at Carnegie Mellon, and the title is intended to reflect those non-library parts of my activities. But maybe I'll mention one of those, which is a program that is delivered primarily in our main university library. It's called Ideate, which stands for the Integration of Design, Arts and Technology. And this is a program open to all Carnegie Mellon undergraduates, generally from their second year onwards, and leads to a number of minors in fields at that intersection of design, arts and technology, things like computer game design, sound and media design, physical computing, wearable technologies.
Okay.
And our intent here is to allow our students to pursue courses in addition to their major that expose them to different ways of thinking, different habits of mind. We believe that in a diverse 21st century world, the ability to foster interdisciplinary cooperation to promote the global exchange of ideas is absolutely critical. And we want our students to understand how to listen to other people, to demonstrate flexibility and cooperate with others. And when we look at the workplace, we recognize that absolutely the first thing is that students graduating, going into the workplace, need a deep knowledge of the work, whatever their field. You need to know how engineering works, how public policy works, how finance works. But in addition to that, we know that people need a facility with technology. They need to be able to think critically, solve problems, participate in interdisciplinary cross-functional teams, and they need to have good people skills to be able to talk with others, be flexible, come in with some emotional intelligence. So we developed this program which brings together faculty and students from all across the university. This year we're offering something between 80 and 100 courses. Faculty come into our university library. We've developed classrooms, laboratories, studios, maker spaces that support the coursework. And we've reached a point now where, between a half and a third of Carnegie Mellon undergraduates will take at least one Ideate course during their undergraduate program. And it really has enabled us to help students appreciate the ways of solving problems, the ways of collaborating with people from very different backgrounds. So you might have a class where you have a music student, a history student, a computer scientist, an engineer, a designer, all working together on a project.
Interesting.
These are, in most universities, these students, of course, might meet in dorms or in societies and clubs, but they would rarely meet in the classroom. And I think that really is missing an opportunity, because we need teams that can work together to address problems from different angles, from innovative approaches. So that's very much at the heart of this sense of interdisciplinary programming at CMU. We have similar things in areas like sustainability that also are tremendously important today.
Yeah, and it's funny because when you're talking about this, I remember reading something. I just had to pull it up because I did have a family that was interested at Carnegie Mellon, and they said one of the things that they heard, and it fit them perfectly, they said, if all over the place is your pace, then you'll find your place at Carnegie Mellon. And it was interdisciplinary is in our DNA. And I think it is fascinating how you speak about that type of education, because it is true, right? In the real world, you have to be I don't say you have to be the jack of all trades, right? But you definitely have to wear more than one hat in almost any type of real position job, right? There's going to be more. And our other host, Dave, I know he's multiple times he's mentioned engineers. Like the most successful engineers that he has met are those that have also a sales background, right? They can speak to the engineering, but they have communicative skills. They can public speak. They can, they worked on those things versus the people that were kind of tunnel vision on the engineering. Like it almost seems like there's a ceiling that they hit when it comes to wage. And I don't mean successful has to be wages, but if that's how you measure it, like there's a level. And then it's the salespeople where you see, oh, you can break that ceiling. But that's where I think some of that interdisciplinary really comes to mind when you were speaking about it.
Yeah.
I also think the idea of, the diversity from a thought perspective is so powerful. And you mentioned like the music and the engineer and the art, like everyone working, people are going to view things differently. Their problem solving will be differently, and coming together, I think that is extremely valuable. And I'm curious, is that something that many colleges kind of offer? Is this something that's pretty unique at Carnegie Mellon? I mean, I would imagine some schools do this, but it's an very interesting concept that I'd like to learn more about.
Yeah, I've got a variety of things to say there. Firstly, I'll just come back to your previous point. I think it's important to understand that interdisciplinarity is much more than knowledge about a second or third discipline. We're not teaching our engineer to be a musician. It's saying, how do you collaborate with a musician?
Yeah.
And I think an important framing there is we are preparing students for jobs and technologies that don't yet exist.
Yeah.
And for them, as they enter the workforce, they've got, let's say, 50 years ahead of them, where they're going to be constantly learning, upskilling. And we want people to understand how to be entrepreneurial, the soft skills of being successful in working with others, and especially in the interdisciplinary teams that we know industry is looking for. A large part of the impetus for this program came from employer feedback. I'm not aware of other universities that are offering this on the scale that we do. We're talking about close to 2,000 students in the Ideate program this year. So the scale is here. Much of the technologies and the areas that we're focusing on are the things that Carnegie Mellon is known for. You can come into Ideate and be exposed to robotics, to artificial intelligence, to design thinking, to music and art, to engineering, as well as the broad range of humanities. An important point here is that each of our minors is certified by an academic department. So one of our newest is in virtual and augmented reality. And students have great opportunities to work with game designers, with cultural specialists, to develop VR installations that are absolutely fascinating. That minor is certified by our modern languages department because they recognize the power of VR in working across different cultures.
Sure.
But I think that to me, the really affirming bit of the program is the feedback that we get from students. That for many, they will tell us this has been the most transformative part of their Carnegie Mellon experience. It has given them confidence. It has, in many cases, taken their careers in very different directions. And we're now at the point where we've had a few years of running the program, and we've got students now who are becoming very successful in their careers. And they come back and tell us the difference that Ideate made, that this helps them stand out in the workplace because, as you say, they've gone beyond that tunnel vision of their disciplinary home. And so people then ask the obvious question, why does this report to the Dean of Libraries? Why is this in the university library? Is it just a way of throwing books out to create space? And the answer is absolutely not. What we see here is that the library is disciplinary neutral. It is not part of any academic field. It is open to every academic field. If we took this program and housed it in our College of Engineering or our College of Fine Arts, it would immediately encourage people to think that it is part of that disciplinary tradition.
Sure. Yeah.
And students from elsewhere on campus might be hesitant about crossing the disciplinary boundary.
Yeah.
But because the library is open to everyone, it is seen as that neutral space. It's almost the Switzerland of the university campus, and brings in people from every part of Carnegie Mellon. And the professors, the 80 to 100 courses we're running, the professors who teach these tell us that it is completely changing their worldview, because they are working with students that they would never see in their classroom.
Sure. Yeah.
And they are able to do innovative things, bring new ways of teaching and working with students that otherwise would not have been possible. So it really is shifting the campus environment in a very dramatic and positive way.
We can send your student to the school of their dreams and send you to your dream retirement. Visit us at elitecollegiateplanning.com to get started.
Yeah. Now, and one of the things you mentioned that I wanted to touch on, you said you're preparing students for the real world, but you're preparing them for potentially things that don't yet exist. Because again, things are evolving quickly. So in this type of position, and with the, kind of trying to, I don't want to say predict the future, but is it more teaching the skills? Is it more teaching the interdisciplinary features are, I would say, almost like how to learn, how to listen, how to speak, because we know a pathway of where we may be headed, but we obviously can't predict the future. But preparing people for those changes, is that kind of the goal of a part of that? Like when you say we're trying to prepare you for the workforce, and what a job title or piece of technology that doesn't exist yet, you have to learn how to be adaptive. Is that a good takeaway from that?
That's a good takeaway. Entirely separately, I am a professional futurist, and people often, ask me to come and talk at a conference and predict the future. And I say, that's not what futurists do. What we do is look at the drivers and signals of change around us, and consider how these might come together to build a number of possible different futures. And the skill there is in figuring out if any one of those possible futures was to happen 10, 20, 30 years from now, what would you wish you had done today to prepare for that future? And that's a way of thinking about the question that you pose. Absolutely, it's critical that students learn the field in their major to prepare them for the workforce today.
Sure.
But recognizing that technology will change, policy will change. We want people to become lifelong learners. Mm-hmm. You don't want a medical student to graduate and continue to practice the way that they do today. They keep up to date, they evolve, and it's the same in every field.
Sure.
And if we think about changes over the last couple of decades, 20 years ago, we hadn't really thought or heard much about social media. Look at the large part of the workforce today that touches social media. That evolved from other fields, from broadcast journalism, from marketing, but took on a distinctive niche. And that's the sort of thing that we encourage our students to be alert to become inquisitive, to be curious, to keep learning once you graduate from Carnegie Mellon. Maybe come back and take a graduate program or a certificate or an executive education course to keep up to date.
And so, I mean, obviously you mentioned social media. It was funny. I was listening to something. It was like, I was driving my kid to football practice and I forgot my phone, and we had to listen to the radio. I can't tell you the last time I listened to the radio. And then when we were listening, I was saying, oh, there's still radio shows? Like there's still radio hosts. And I say, and I was like, wow, that really has changed. For years, I've but now I listen to podcasts, right? I listen to, that media has completely changed as well. You mentioned social media, and then obviously now AI is a very big topic, and what's the future look like with artificial intelligence? What do you see as some of the, I don't want to say struggles, but what do you see as exciting trends, kind of not to predict the future, but what do you see as far as, when it comes to education and preparing for things? And obviously we're in a very fast moving world right now, right? So what are some of the things that you are seeing that are pretty exciting from the higher education trends with these and preparing minds for them?
You mentioned AI, and it's impossible to avoid conversations about AI in the higher education space today. Every time I open the Chronicle or Inside Higher Ed, AI is in the headlines. Every conference that I go to focuses on AI. And I don't think at this stage, where are we, 18 months into the ChatGPT variant of AI, I don't think higher education or K-12 education has really decided what its position should be. I think there are some faculty, some institutions that are taking a more cautious approach. We don't want at this stage to have students using ChatGPT to support their learning because we think it gets in the way of core skills such as reading and thinking.
Sure.
Conversely, there are people who think that we want students to become familiar with AI. And, my sense is that whilst students might indeed use AI to shortcut learning, I'm not sure how we could ban them from it.
Right.
And I think it also, any sort of restriction there would shortcut a different type of learning opportunity, which is that in a university setting, we can help students learn how to use AI in a safe space. We want students to explore generative AI, where they can have conversations about the ethics of it, where they can learn about and think about where the data comes from and what this means for their thinking and communication and authenticity and authorship. So I really think that sense of AI safety, that aspiration to make artificial intelligence trustworthy and reliable, means that AI is going to be a big thing for some time to come. And I do hope that we can embrace and engage students on that journey. The other technology that I think I would touch on is that world of virtual and augmented reality and the opportunities we see for students to really enrich their learning through the use of VR as a pedagogical tool. So imagine a healthcare student who is able to examine eyes, simulating a real world experience, but using a virtual reality tool rather than having to find a patient who's got the right conditions, who's willing to be subjected to a student's activities. That is a common thing in medical education today. We see students in architecture using virtual reality to build walkthroughs of their designs so that their instructors, their clients can put on a headset and navigate through a student's design rather than looking at renderings or plans on paper. Engineers are doing the same with new buildings, new technologies, simulating disaster zones and recovery operations. So I think that is an incredibly powerful opportunity. I mentioned our Ideate VR minor being taught in modern languages because there we can create experiences for students to simulate walking down a street in Paris and conversing in French as though they were in the capital of France. And those are incredibly powerful opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, immediately, if you say VR to someone, I'm sure they're thinking video games. Right? It's probably what most people immediately go to. It's what I would think, oh yeah, but you see those people, the videos of people playing a game when they're in the middle of their room. But the idea of taking that technology from an educational standpoint is pretty fascinating. The ideas of potentially getting real world experience and increasing the availability for opportunities where, hey, otherwise you may have to travel somewhere to get a specific example or real life, we'll say, experience, where now there is the potential of doing that from a VR standpoint. That is very interesting, and one I wouldn't think of. I wanted to go back to the AI conversation, and I know you said you can't avoid it, right? But it's been a big topic of discussion on the past few episodes that we've had. And I'm always about perspective. And one of our guests mentioned, well, the way I look at it is, how many years ago was it that the calculator was invented? Right. And we were slide rules advocates. It has gotten to a point where we would never look back at it now and say, you're not allowed to use a calculator. Right. But you still have to know how to use the calculator to get the right answer. And that was kind of our guest's example on how to use this tool properly to assist you. It doesn't take over, right? If you don't know the basic of math, then you don't know how to, and what numbers to input, what formulas you're going to put into that calculator to get the proper answer. So it doesn't do all the work for you, but if used properly, it can be a tool, right? But I think what you mentioned is the scary part, where, is it going to be used as a tool or more as a, it takes away from the learning, piece of it, that it's going to replace the learning aspect. But it was just a perspective that I haven't never thought about that. I'm like, you would call me crazy if you said you're never allowed to use a calculator, right? It can make life easier, but you still have to know how to use it. So,
but you touched there on a really important aspect of the role of librarians today. I talked about how we have redesigned our libraries really to become information hubs and study environments. But the role of librarians, I would argue, is more critical than ever. And part of that critical role is helping students learn how to find and evaluate information. And just as we might want students to learn how to find a bunch of journal articles for an essay and reflect upon what they're reading, so those same skills apply to things like AI. I put some prompts into ChatGPT and I get a response. How do I know whether this is right or not?
Correct.
Early in my career, when I was working in a reference library environment, one of the golden rules was, when you find a response to a question, you double check it. You don't just accept the first hit. And it's exactly the same with generative AI today. And when I put in prompts in fields that I'm up to date with, I can tell pretty quickly what's right and what is maybe misleading. And we still see these hallucinations. Clearly, the engines are becoming more sophisticated, but you will see the platform, creating responses to fill gaps. And the best example in the academic space we've seen in the past 18 months is the number of fake references to journal articles that will come out, because the LLM knows that there needs to be something there. And if it doesn't have an accurate reference to point to, it will make it up. So helping everyone critically reflect upon what they get from their AI platform of choice is absolutely critical. So you've got your, I would say to students, if you are putting an essay prompt into ChatGPT or Gemini or any other platform, go and verify it.
Right.
Every point that's in there, because your instructor will read this and figure out pretty quickly what's not accurate. And I think that willingness and openness to embrace accuracy of information goes way beyond AI. There is a real susceptibility today to misinformation, to fakes in media. We need to be constantly critically questioning the information that comes in front of us. Look at the authority of the source it's coming from. If it's something that's been commercially published, has it come from a reputable publisher, one that you're familiar with? What are the author's credentials? What competing opinions might you find? Can you verify and validate data that are presented in an argument? It's all part of being an engaged citizen.
Yeah. And we had an episode, the whole episode was talking about AI a few weeks back. And the professor that spoke said, a couple of years from now, maybe more than a couple, it might be a little rough when we get there, but the ability to critically think and basically take what is given to us and then have to critically think about the response and where did it come from? Is it correct? The ability to research to find if that answer is correct is something that's going to be a necessity. And his takeaway was that our society will become better for it, right? You mentioned the media, misinformation. A lot of people read headlines right now and that's it, right? They don't follow up with certain things, or we know that statistics, and if there's a view on one thing, a story can be presented and then the other side presents the same story in a very different light with a very different takeaway. But the ability of potentially using AI, but then forcing people to critically think is actually something that will help, not necessarily hurt. And he said it might take a while before we get there to realize that you have to critically think and not take everything at face value. But I said, hey, I think that's something we really do need to get back to. I think that the ability and critical thinking at its core some of it has gone away. It hasn't been as prevalent. And I think if there is artificial intelligence that kind of gets us back to that, I welcome it personally. But it was an interesting, when you kind of were talking about that, it was reminding me of that episode that we had a couple of weeks back.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to think about AI, not only the risk of it producing false information, but also the risks of it reinforcing bias and discrimination.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Deepening inequities or being used or misused for oppressive, destabilizing, dangerous purposes. It is, again, it comes back to the point I made about AI safety, but also it just calls upon all of us to become aware of how this technology is unfolding and being ready to engage not only with each other, with educators, but also with politicians, because we can look at trends in the European Union, for example, where the legislative branch is very much focused on these risks. We see the power of the technology, but it comes with downsides. And we don't want to impede progress, but it needs to be responsible progress.
Absolutely. So one of my last questions, obviously, I love the mentality and the education that you have spoken about at Carnegie Mellon and the interdisciplinary factors. When students are in high school and they might be listening to this, or they would say, that sounds interesting. Are there any specific traits that you would say are a fit at Carnegie Mellon that maybe like, oh, that kind of, I don't know exactly what I want to do, but I like the idea of getting a different perspective and being prepared for different things, learning to learn the right way. And it's something that Carnegie Mellon offers very specifically. I'd love to hear that. But is there anything that maybe when a student visits Carnegie Mellon or any piece, any type of traits or characteristics, say this is the type of student that is a great fit for our program and our school?
A really interesting question. We attract a very diverse cohort of students. Okay. And I think that maybe speaks to response one to your question, a desire to be part of a diverse community. People from different backgrounds. We've got a very international campus, so an interest in learning alongside people from very different cultures and backgrounds. And I think an overarching curiosity. We really embrace, and I see students who succeed here are ones who come in with open and inquiring minds. You've got the world's experts in the fields that we excel at on your doorstep. They are here to teach you. They are here to go and knock on a professor's door and ask questions. It's that sort of environment. Mm-hmm. So coming here with a desire to appreciate that you don't have all of the answers coming into CMU. You are here to learn, but to learn as a collaborator in your journey. You're not here just to be talked at. You're here to be actively engaged and to participate in the educational process.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So my last question before we sign off today was looking you up a little bit before our interview today. And I happened to see something related to at the Carnival, a Douse a Dean fundraiser. Is this something you're going to be doing again this year?
We'll be doing it again on, I think, the 12th of April. So this is a great tradition that started a few years ago. It's all about traditions. Yeah. Where our president, Farnham Jahanian, when he was provost, helped the Carnegie Mellon University Police Department. They were fundraising, and they continue to fundraise for the Special Olympics. And he agreed to be put in a dunk tank, and people could pay to dunk him. Yeah. Over time, we've evolved to dousing, which is a bit more gentle, but each of the deans dresses up, and we sit under a bucket of water, and people line up, and believe me, they do line up to pay $1 to throw a few balls at the button that will soak us in water.
Sure.
And honestly, Pittsburgh in the middle of April, and this is during the annual carnival, which is the highlight of the student social year. The weather in Pittsburgh then, it can be warm and sunny, it can be snowing. So we need to plan ahead for the weather. Each of the deans produces YouTube videos, other things to encourage people to come and get us wet and give for an incredibly important cause.
Yeah. And is there a little competition here as well?
There's a very big competition.
Okay. All right. Between the deans, and is that where the competition is?
Between the deans, there is a trophy that goes to the dean who raises the most money each year.
Okay.
And it has become almost pathologically rivalrous. There's a huge amount of fun engagement. The great thing at Carnegie Mellon is the deans really enjoy working with each other. We have a very active relationship with each other. It's a fun competition. But yeah, I'll be hoping to take the trophy home this year.
Okay. Now, is it can you only raise money from people being there throwing balls at a target, or is it something that can be raised online? Do you have to be at Carnegie Mellon to donate?
I believe there is an online way to support this. If you have show notes, I can send a link to that.
Definitely, because I would say I appreciate all this conversation and some of the takeaways and highlighting what Carnegie Mellon has to offer. And I think some of the other big takeaways, I mean, again, just understanding, hey, the library is going to be where you spend the majority of your waking hours as a student. Make sure to visit that on a campus and ask yourself very powerful questions about how much of a fit that library is, not just the overall campus. We always focus on the social, academic, and financial fit of a school is how you win the game. You have to find a school that nails all three of those. And I can tell you, if you don't visit the library, right? If that's not on your make sure I do this and really have some questions going into it, every campus, you're going to miss that, right? And so I think that was a very big takeaway that I had today. But I would love to be able to help you win that trophy if there's any way that we can for being a guest on the show. So definitely make sure to send us our link. Our listeners, if you want to help the Special Olympics, if you want to help Dean Webster win this trophy, please donate. I'm sure that we will have a link for this in all of our show notes moving forward.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Dean, thank you so much for being a guest today. It really was a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed our time together. Everyone, this has been another episode of College Knowledge. If you like this episode, make sure to listen to the rest of our episodes. We are on all platforms and on social media, and we look forward to seeing you again in the near future. Take care.
Thank you guys for being a part of College Knowledge. Just a reminder, if you're sending your student to school, visit elitecollegiateplanning.com for free resources and to book a free consultation.